Hello friends, I am back with another marker illustration video to celebrate Ohuhu's 5th year anniversary. Ohuhu have been kindly supporting my channel for quite some time, and not only do I love their affordable markers and sketchbooks, they have been a really great company to work with as well. So to celebrate Ohuhu's 5th anniversary, we thought that it'd be fun for me to revisit one of my own illustrations from 5 years ago to see how I've progressed as an artist. I found this old drawing I did of Daria Morgendorffer from the classic 90s cartoon Daria, and admittedly I did do a doodle of her recently in a previous video, which kind of inspired me to revisit this illustration because I feel like she deserved a proper redraw. In the old version, I used watercolor, colored pencils, and fine liners, whereas this time around, I will be using the Ohuhu alcohol markers with colored pencils and acrylic ink, which will achieve a really similar look. As per usual, I started the piece using my favorite red coal erase colored pencil to begin the sketch, using a really light hand for easy erasing. In the old version, I had the portrait partially framed in a circle with one of Daria's many relatable quotes underneath. I wanted my new version to be similar but not exact, so I decided to go with this arch shape for the framing instead and kept the portrait totally inside the shape as well, because I think that this will make for a really cute sticker. If you're familiar with the series, you'd know that Daria's personality is pretty dry, and she has a fairly apathetic attitude and just general disdain for most things. And I really wanted to push that in her expression, which I definitely intended to the first time, but I don't think I successfully conveyed it quite as well. So I made sure to really emphasize that feeling in her eyes this time around. And in the cartoon, her eyebrows are not visible, which I imagine is due to just like being covered by her glasses or her hair and for simplicity's sake. And even though in my version the glasses do overlap her eyebrows a little bit, I wanted to include them, even just peeking out a little bit, just to help reinforce the expression. And then another adjustment that I made to my new version of her was I gave a little bit more movement in her bangs. I had a little bit more texture. I kind of broke it up a little bit, which is a very subtle change from the original character design and my original version, but I think it really brings more life to a static portrait. And then lastly, the arch motif I put her in reminded me of like a mirror, which led me to add in the little graphics around her as if she's looking at her reflection in a mirror that's covered in stickers. And the Sick Sad World, of course, is a nod to the TV show that her and her friend Jane Lane watches all the time. And then they eat pizza all the time, so that's another thing that I included. And then the little smile, like the sad face and the little rain cloud, were just little nods to her personality, and again, just trying to capture her kind of vibe in something that's just a simple portrait. Also, for those of you who are wondering, I think I still want to include the "I hate everything" quote in the new version too on the bottom, but I will likely do the text digitally, either in Photoshop or Procreate instead, for when I actually make the sticker design. I think it'll look a little cleaner, and I can also choose a fun font to go with it as well. So something that I often get questions about in relation to using alcohol markers is how to get an even coverage for solid shapes and areas. So as you'll see in the process of me drawing here, I was actually being pretty impatient, so a lot of areas ended up being quite patchy and streaky, but an easy way to combat this is to just go over the area again with the same marker. A couple of things to note about doing this though is that it will make the shade darker, and you also have to make sure that the paper you're using can handle that much ink coverage. Thankfully, this Ohuhu marker paper is designed specifically for alcohol markers and has a really good thickness on it as well. All of the Ohuhu marker sets and sketchbooks come with like a thin plastic sheet that you can use underneath your paper to protect the next page or your desk from any possible marker bleed through. But I've been using these for quite a while now, and I have yet to actually experience any of the ink going through to the other side. But it is nice to have that plastic sheet there just as a precaution, because you never know. And yeah, it just gives you a little bit of reassurance just in case that might happen, especially since I am currently working on a white desk. So it would suck to have any staining on it. For a long time, I actually really struggled using alcohol markers, and while I certainly don't consider myself an expert, I've learned to adapt the way that I use them that makes the most sense for me. As many of you probably know, manga and anime is something that has inspired my work quite a lot since I was young, and a lot of manga artists use alcohol markers in a very blended way that almost looks like watercolor, and this style of rendering I just found so difficult to grasp with alcohol markers, and I had got it in my head that it was the only way to use them. As the process goes in this illustration, you can see that I do use that kind of blended technique a little bit with her face. And that's something that is definitely easier to achieve with brush tip markers because you can kind of use that flicking motion to create the gradients and the blending, but I still find this way of using alcohol markers kind of difficult. So I try to do it sparingly and mainly focus doing that kind of style of markers in the face. And then so for the rest of the marker illustration process, I normally go for pretty solid areas and solid shapes. And yeah, I just realized that, you know, just because artists that I admire use the medium one way didn't necessarily mean I also had to use them in that same manner. So instead of trying to focus on all these seamless gradients and blendings with the markers on every little element, I decided to eventually incorporate colored pencils on top instead, which not only gave me more control, but also allows for more color variations and provides an interesting texture as well. Using the colored pencils allows me to smooth over any potential patchy areas, and I can also make certain areas more saturated or desaturated depending on what I think will suit the piece best. Additionally, and probably my favorite part, is using unexpected colors in select areas, like how I add in some purple for the shadows, and later on you'll see me add some pinks and blues in her hair as well. I just find that doing this creates more interest and dimension to the piece, and it's also just really fun to experiment with the colors this way. Something that I've noticed over the past little while as I get more experience using alcohol markers is that I'm often a little timid in going too dark, which eventually leads to the piece looking washed out after I've added in line art or darker elements. And I think the reason for that is similar to using watercolors. The same goes for markers. If you go too dark in an area, you can't remove it because it's a transparent medium. But the flexibility in using colored pencils is that even if an area ends up being a little bit too dark, I can use lighter shades of colored pencil to brighten up an element, which you'll see I do here for the blazer. Colored pencils is actually the first medium that I really got into back in my high school days, because at that time, the alcohol marker options were much more limited, and that also meant that the price point was just not accessible to me. So I think it's really, really great to see brands like Ohuhu who make affordable products for beginners and people on a budget, but still have a pretty good quality. And man, if I had this option in high school, I would have been over the moon. So it's really nice to see that there's just more options for people now. Anyways, we've now kind of reached the point in the video where I've run out of things to say about my actual drawing process. But I will say, previous to working on this video, I actually hadn't done much drawing or painting for a little over a week or so, which was a longer break than usual for me just because of the way that I've structured my schedule and career and stuff. But yeah, I've just been having a difficult time motivating myself to make any art. But the nice thing about having this video lined up and just working on this fan art redraw was that I didn't have to use as much creative brain power, and I think that really helped ease me back into making something. I was a little bit worried about, being really rusty and having this piece turn out really poorly because I felt like I hadn't made anything for a little bit, but I think that going into something like this really was much easier. And yeah, whenever I'm feeling particularly unmotivated art-wise, I find that I just really like to fall back to fan art. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I generally find it very comforting. And if you've seen my last video where I reacted to a bunch of my old artwork from high school, you'll know very well that making fan art of my favorite characters was really where my art journey started out. And what's interesting about doing fan art for a cartoon like Daria is that the style is quite different from mine. And if you're familiar with Daria, the style is very cartoony, really simple, but my artwork, of course, is a little bit more detailed. So it's interesting to kind of add more information or to stylize the character in a way that's a little bit more fleshed out. And that definitely is a little bit more challenging to take on, but it's also really fun and really satisfying to see the result because, you're so familiar with seeing the character in one way and then being able to bring the character to life in a different way is really fun. Several months ago, I had started rewatching Daria, and I have to say, it still holds up really well. Not only are the characters really entertaining, but the social commentary throughout the series is still very relevant to today, even though this series was made in the 90s. Also, the dialogue is so hilarious and witty. There's so many quotable moments that I keep trying to commit to memory to use in my everyday life because they're so relatable. Oh, and of course, being the millennial that I am, I just love seeing all of the nostalgic things throughout the show, like people using Walkmans, the fashion choices, the pop culture references made for that time, etc., etc. I think that a common theme that's been happening for me, especially in this pandemic and as I get older in general, is I've just been feeling like I want to keep reliving things from my past and just like reliving all of that nostalgia. I think that as someone who grew up in the 90s and early 2000s, the technology and the internet, like things were just changing so quickly and so fast. And I think that living through that experience, you feel really attached to life before all of that technology and that fast-paced environment. So I don't know. I feel like, the pandemic has been hard on all of us. And so I'm just relishing in anything that brings me comfort and some kind of relief, I guess, for the chaos that we've been enduring right now. That being said, I hope that for all of you who are watching my content, that I am also able to bring you some comfort and entertainment during these difficult times. All of your lovely comments and support really help me just to keep going, not only financially, but also mentally and emotionally as well. So thank you for watching my content and commenting, and I'm just very thankful for that. So thank you. Also, before we go, I just wanted to let all of you know that in celebration for Ohuhu's 5th anniversary, they are also offering 20% off their products as well for a limited time. I'll have the links in my description if you want to grab something for yourself. And so, yeah, that wraps up today's video. I hope that you are all taking care of yourselves, staying healthy and safe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!